How do you think on the effects of heavy reliance on AI?
The results won't be out 10 years, 20 years down the line. We are all part of that mass experiment.
Could you explain ChatGPT's influence on our brains?
There was an interesting study by MIT. Those that were just creating the answers using their brain power alone had more electrical activity within their brains, and particularly much more so than those people using AI.
CROSS DIG 101始まります。今日のテーマは人間の脳は AI で衰えるのかです。2025年アメリカの MIT の研究で生成 AI への依存が脳活動の低下につながる可能性があるという結果が発表されました。これ大きな話題を呼んだんですけれども、この AI を今使いこなしながら自分の脳をどう守っていけばいいのか。今日はイギリスの神経科学者で脳の専門家のハンナ・クリッチローさんと AI との正しい付き合い方について深掘りしていきます。Okay, so we have Dr. Hannah Critchlow, a neuroscientist based at the University of Cambridge, on the show. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for the invitation to join you, Masa.
Yeah. So before we go into the details, could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you do, what kind of research, and what do you mainly focus on?
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Hannah Critchlow. I'm a science fellow based at Magdalen College, University of Cambridge. I did my PhD there studying synaptic plasticity and how our brains create their perception of the world and our sense of reality and how that impacts the decision making.
So we've been covering a lot of AI stories on the media, and we've been talking about all things AI around the world today. So are you personally using AI like ChatGPT, and how do you think it's affecting your brain?
I think it's impossible almost not to use AI with today's technology. So on my phone, for example, AI has started summarizing group chats to keep me up to date if I've kind of missed out on what's going on with my son's parent group conversations. So, increasingly AI is encroaching on, I'd say, probably all of our lives across the majority of the globe.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So we actually have three topics to talk about with you today. And one is ChatGPT's influence on our brains. So we're going to dive deeper on the study from MIT. And another topic is how AI is going to change our intelligence. So we'll look into the world of neuroscience and cognitive science as a research, and you see how AI is going to shape it in the near future. And the final part, we discuss how to use AI, how to leverage AI to protect our brains. Yeah, about the first topic, ChatGPT's influence on our brains.
There was an interesting study that was published very recently by a group of researchers based at MIT in America. And it had some quite interesting findings. They segregated those 54 people into three different groups. A group that was using AI in order to answer a series of questions, like kind of essay type questions, those that were using just the typical search engine, and those that were just using their brains in order to create an essay and answer some questions. And what they found with these participants when they measured the electrical activity within their brains was that those that were just creating the answers using their brain power alone actually had more electrical activity within their brains. So they were having to engage with the task using their own recall and trying to reference their own information that they had held just within their brains rather than being able to rely on any external sources of information. So they did this over 3 trials and found that those people that were just relying on their brains actually got a lot better at the task as it went on. So by the third time, they really were very good. And they were again kind of engaging their brains much more so than those people that were using the search engine, and particularly much more so than those people using AI. Now, what happened at the end of this study, and this was in a much smaller number of people at the final test, it was only 18 people. And again, they put them into the 3 different groups, so there were 6 people in each group. those that were using AI, those that were using just a general search engine, and those that were just using their brains. And what they found is that those people that were trying to do this new fourth task using just their brains, so now they weren't using AI, weren't as good, they weren't up to speed as those people that had completed the first three tasks using their brains. Now, this is something that we actually call the familiarization effect. So basically, as you practice a particular task, as you get used to it, as you get more familiar with it, you will do better at it. Generally, your performance will increase and your brain regions that are being activated will get used to being used in that particular way. So it's not surprising that that AI group weren't succeeding as well as the group that were just using their brain power alone in the first three tests.
What was your initial reaction after the study came out? What went through your mind when you first saw it?
Press really pounced on the findings and made some quite large statements about it. It's a very small scale study that followed the participants over a very short amount of time. So it's very difficult to make any generalized kind of conclusions about the impact of AI on humanity as a result of that small scale study. But it is a very important study, and it's important that it was conducted, and it will be important to follow up these preliminary results.
Yeah. Well, how do you think the research community is going to follow up on those kind of research, the effect of heavy reliance on AI?
Any impacts will probably take place over a long period of time, and it will require a high number of people to be involved in these studies. I think basically the results won't be out on any of this until maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, as we see the impacts on people my age or children growing up using these tools. So I think basically we are all part of that mass experiment. And it's up to us, really, to decide how we're going to use AI, whether we're going to be using it intelligently, whilst also exercising our own cognitive powers that lie within us innately and naturally.
So moving on to the next part, how AI is going to change our intelligence. But before we go further, I think we need to step back a little bit and about the human brain, our own brain. So could you explain how the human brain forms a sense of reality, how brain works basically, from your neuroscientist perspective?
It's quite a complex task, and actually some of the recent findings from neuroscience and understanding how our human neural networks operate have obviously gone on to inspire the generation of artificial intelligence systems. But just taking that step back, as you say, to look at the human brain. So we've got something like 86 billion nerve cells in our brain, each one of them connected to up to 10,000 other cells, creating this really intricate circuit board of around 86 trillion connections. These connections between the nerve cells can actually change as we learn from our environment, as we form new memories, new connections are made, new pathways by which electric signals can whoosh across the brain to create our thoughts, our ideas, and even our emotions, and also instruct us how to move and how to communicate with each other. So that's basically the fundamentals of the brain. We have these units, nerve cells, neurons, that pump sodium and potassium ions in and out of the cell membrane to create this electric charge which zips across the nerve cell to the next nerve cell in the circuit, which carries on whooshing those electric signals around the brain at speeds of around 120 miles an hour to create our complex behaviors. And the genes that we've been given from our mum and dad create that foundation for thought, that foundational circuit board. But as we go through life, we learn new things, and that changes the complexity and can almost prune back our identity and create new identities. So even if we peered into, my son's brain, there'd be a huge amount of movement of new connections being made. But if we looked at, for example, my parents' brain, there'd still be a huge amount of movement and change occurring. So throughout our lifespan, we can change and learn from the environment and build on our skills, obviously.
Right. And it's interesting, you've been arguing that humanity is currently undergoing a massive evolutionary transition from functioning as individuals toward creating collective intelligence, or that what you call a super brain. I think that's the sort of relevant to the recent development of AI kind of thing. And so tell us what it is and why it matters right now.
Yeah, so there's a number of researchers that are basically saying we are undergoing a major evolutionary transition at the moment as a species. And it's a very important part in terms of our species evolution and thinking about how we might survive and thrive into the future. So we're at a pivotal point during our evolution, many scientists believe. So there was a report in the Royal Society kind of journal just a few years ago, looking at this, where researchers basically concluded that our genes are no longer having an important impact on the way we individually are developing. And actually, our environment, our culture, the technologies around us are starting to have more of an impact than our genes. And this is for the first time in our species history, this is occurring. And the idea is that we've almost kind of been compelled to develop these incredible technologies that allow us to share perspectives and share information and wisdom, and then kind of gather or harvest that information much more effectively. So in effect, over the last, not just the last 5 years or 10 years, but over the last hundreds of years, what's been integral to our species' success is this ability of ours and this desire of ours to actually want to communicate with other people, with other humans, and to learn from them. So way back in our species history, we forged as Homo kind of sapiens, we actually had a drive to explore, to travel to new islands, and to meet and to intermingle with different kind of tribes so that we could learn from them. And then if you kind of think about every other development that we've had, so for example, transport developments, the creation of ships, boats, trains, aeroplanes, the development of these incredible technologies, laptops, so we can, and having the internet and having Zoom, so that we can actually communicate with each other from very different countries in real time. We're sharing all this information in real time, and we've been compelled to develop these technologies that allow us to do this, so that we can start to fuse our intelligence together. And share our perspectives. And this allows us to have ideas that can hop from mind to mind so that we can innovate and problem solve much more effectively. And we've also got a greater cognitive pool, a greater cognitive breadth of intelligence that we can actually access when we bring groups of brains together. So all of these technologies, including social media as well, which is allowing us to kind of share perspective, have been part of this roadmap that humans, Homo sapiens, have been steering since the very early days of when we created a craft and decided to try and go over to the next island, And it's all thought to be part of this idea, this being this compulsion of ours to create more of a organic supercomputer, or a hive mind, if you like. So we're at a key point in our evolution where we've reached a really, really quick rate at which we can share ideas, that we can communicate with each other across the globe. And it is creating this hive mind, which is a little bit like, I don't know, a colony of ants or a beehive, for example. So we are creating this kind of supercomputer, this biological supercomputer.
So what will happen if we add AI into those collective intelligence?
Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? So we've used our understanding of our own human neural networks to help create a new tool of artificial intelligence that's inspired by those neural networks that can help us to access the vast amount of data that we've created in order to make synopsis and to make new discoveries. So it's adding an extra layer of tools that we have developed in a long line of tools that we've developed that are in pursuit of this sharing information, kind of accessing a greater amount of information in order to be able to innovate and to problem solve and create much more effectively. All of this is helping us to see how we can start to create more knowledge within our shared global kind of information wealth, and then start to see more patterns so that we can then from there innovate and create much more effectively as well. So that's a positive use of AI. Now obviously there can be a dark side to all of this, as we've seen in history. So unfortunately human history is, as well as being littered with great achievements, if we also look back throughout our human species, there's many examples of atrocities that have happened. And part of the reason that I really wanted to write the book, The 21st Century Brain, is so that we can kind of almost pause and take stock and think, oh, well, hang on, we've developed this great tool. How exactly are we going to use it? How do we want to use it before just hitting the button and detonating? Like, how do we actually want to really reflect on how we want to use it intelligently so that it can help our species further into the future, so that it can help our descendants, so that, you know, our descendants will be proud of the decisions that we've made. So it's really looking at how we can start to use our own human intelligence to help with this evolutionary process and kind of make it go in a positive direction.
Yeah. So what's the dark side of AI in that context from your perspective?
There was a study that was published in 2024 by researchers based at the University of Delaware, Delaware State, and it was published in, it was Fang and others in Scientific Reports. They basically decided that New York Times and Reuters were two publications in America that they thought were, you know, unbiased, the least sexist and the least racist compared to a number of other publications. And they basically got ChatGPT to have a look at some of the headlines that these newspapers had reported on and create their own stories based on that. And they had the training data of the whole of the World Wide Web to kind of use as training data. And what the ChatGPT basically created was then analysed by a number of linguists and a number of reporters. And what they discovered was that basically a number of these LLMs, not just ChatGPT, but other ones, basically had a much higher incidence of racism and sexism compared to the traditional news like New York Times and Reuters. And there was a slightly higher incidence of sexism than racism. And what the researchers concluded was that basically this is a mirror. So they'd used the whole World Wide Web, all of the information there, and all of the content that was there to reflect that back in the article that they were creating. And so actually it was just basically this data was saying, oh, you know, society is quite sexist and racist. And it's something that we have to kind of like contemplate as a group, as a species.
So what about heavy reliance on AI? Are you not too much worried? You talked about many things, many situations where we can augment our intelligence by AI. So how are you thinking about the too much reliance on AI in the future, looking forward?
So I think, again, it depends on how we use it. So back in, I think it was Aristotle's or Socrates' day, you know, when the written word was coming in, they were saying that actually it would erode our ability to debate and speak to each other because we would just be practicing, you know, using like reading and writing what was available in books. And to some degree, they were correct. However, I think the development of text and the use of it in a widespread way has actually, by and large, created more benefits than it does outweigh the risks. And I would say that as long as we use AI in an intelligent way, we don't try to outsource our intelligence and become cognitively lazy, as long as we embrace it in a way that is wise and we create educational changes that reflect intelligent use of AI in much the same way that, we have done with adopting the calculator for maths tests, so that people couldn't address and tackle much more complex mathematical issues.
Yes.
I would say that perhaps we can use LLMs in a similar way for the arts and the humanities.
And before we go into the final part, I have one question to ask you. Everyone in the AI industry has been talking about the thing called AGI, artificial general intelligence, which everyone have the different definition of the word, of the term, but basically AGI is supposed to outperform human intelligence. So how are you thinking about it from the perspective of a neuroscientist? How will it affect human as a species when we have AGI?
There's been a number of researchers who have been working on AI that have been calling for a pause in its use, and highlighting that there are potential catastrophic consequences of using it badly. I think perhaps we need a global mandate, like an agreement across all the different countries for regulations on the use of AI and for careful consideration of it. And I think as an international community, as a global community, it would be useful to create that type of framework so that everybody is working with humanity's future in mind and thinking about how we can use this incredible tool intelligently.
Thank you. So moving on to the final part, how to leverage AI to protect our brains. You've been talking about we should use AI intelligently. So our audience is a lot of business professionals in Japan. And from your perspective, what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to using AI at work as business professionals?
Use it for tools that you think it can do, but also critically, it's a new tool, right? So how much do you trust it? So critically appraise, question the information that it comes back with. And then also be aware that any answer that it is giving you is a reflection of the information that we've put into the World Wide Web. So it will have those biases, those errors that humanity might have. So perhaps as an individual, your answer will be actually much more insightful. And so it's making sure that you question the information that it's coming back with. So for example, I know that if I search on AI, about myself or about neuroscience things that I know, and I know quite expertly, that there'll be a heap of errors that come up. I know it's very impressive what it does come up with that is accurate, but then I will spot a number of errors and a number of flaws in the way that they're thinking, and also ways that aren't very original in thinking. So AI can be very good at creating a synopsis, a summary, but it needs error checking, and it needs critical appraisal to consider all of the biases that exist within it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lastly, how exactly should we cherish our own abilities, our own intelligence? How we leverage fully our own intelligence?
Yeah, this is a really important question because each one of us has this phenomenal brain power at our disposal. I was talking about these 86 billion nerve cells with 86 trillion connections. We're able to create this using this incredible circuit board of our mind. We're able to process something like 11 billion bits of information per second that's coming in through our senses to create an up-to-date sense of reality in our perception of the world. It's an exceptional computational power, and really appreciate that and look after our brains so that it continues to do that with high agility. It can continue to tolerate all the uncertainty of these changing landscapes with all these technological fast-paced changes, but also many of the other societal changes, so that we don't feel overwhelmed by it. But actually we have, full access to that intelligence. So exercise, for example, is a key one. Something that we know intuitively to be true. It's good for our physical body, but it's also very good for our brains. So exercise, we know, causes the birth of new brain cells in particular areas of the brain. like the hippocampus, which is a key region involved in learning, memory, and imagination, and being able to navigate our space and create our sense of reality. And if you exercise, you ramp up the rate of this neurogenesis, this birth of new brain cells. So exercise is very good for us. We also know that it releases endorphins, which makes us feel positive, so we have more energy. And also we know that exercise is incredibly good for these little minuscule structures that are found in almost every one of our cells in our body, these little things called mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of our cells. And there's thousands of them in every one of our nerve cells. These mitochondria basically create the fuel that we need so that we can move, but also so that we can think. So anything that we can do to help these mitochondria to flourish and create really nice, clean fuel in our brain is a very good thing. And we know that exercise creates a positive feedback loop. So when you exercise, your body and your brain senses that you require more energy because you're expending more energy. And so that actually helps to create more mitochondria. They multiply within our cells because they can sense that you need more fuel. And so they make more of themselves so that they can create more of that fuel that you need. So exercise is really good for the brain on a number of levels, and it helps to keep that plasticity, that agility alive within your brain, even as we age. We also know that social interaction is very good for our brains, so that those new nerve cells can help integrate within the existing circuit boards within our mind, so that we can incorporate what we've learned during the day into a memory and integrate it into the way that we behave and creating new habits. So social interaction and exploring ideas and different environments, very good for keeping that plasticity within our brain. We also know that sleep is very good for plasticity in the brain, because it helps to consolidate what we've learned during the day, and it also helps to clean away any toxins that have been produced during that high metabolic activity during the day of thinking and doing. And then what else? Eating healthily. So making sure that these mitochondria kind of basically are able to run on clean fuel. So we know that processed food, very high sugar, very high fat food, can actually shrink the hippocampal volume. And we also know that if we eat nice, clean food that's particularly high in protein, that can be very, very good for the brain, and also very high in kind of healthy fats. So fats that you might find in nuts or fish, for example, actually helps to create a lovely layer of really healthy fat that wraps around each nerve cell, that helps to insulate that electrical activity in the brain, so that the electric signals can run really quickly across the brain with high integrity, so without losing their speed or without losing their signal.
Yeah, I think we think and talk too much about the technology. You reminded us the importance of like keeping ourselves healthy and make human.
Yeah, we've got this incredible imagination, incredible creativity, incredible way of connecting with each other and sharing our intelligence that we've developed throughout our evolution. And all right, we've got this new tool that's been inspired by our own brains that we've developed out of our imagination. But, we also have this incredible, phenomenal computational power at our own disposal, and we just need to really make use of it.
Great. Yeah, great to hear all of it. Thank you. Thank you very much. We had Dr. Hannah Critchlow on our show. Thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you. Cheers, Nata. Thank you.